Hello everyone and welcome to IFE Connects, the new online community for the food, drink and hospitality industry. My name is Nicola Woods and I'm the event manager for IFE, the International Food and Drink event. I'm delighted to welcome Sandra Sullivan, Director of the Food and Drink Exporters Association, to lead the discussion with our panel of experts on insights into export and taking your brands to new markets. The three-part event will finish with a live Q&A, so do ask your questions using the Q&A function and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can before the end of the broadcast. Thank you for joining us today. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Nikki, and good morning, everyone. And first of all, a big thank you to the IFE Connects team for inviting us to talk to you today about our world of food and drink exports. We're very pleased to support the platform, very pleased to support the initiative. And I guess in these days where we still can't travel, it's great that we can still connect through these kind of events. What we're going to do today is to run through in 3 sessions, and I'm delighted that we've been really well supported by a number of our Food and Drink Exporters Association members. The 3 sessions will all include insights from our members, and that includes our members who are food and drink suppliers, but also 2 of our international in-market experts, one from the Middle East and one from the ASEAN region. So I think we've got a good balance of information for new exporters, insights from very well-established exporters, and some inspiration for you, hopefully, for looking at new markets. So a little bit about the FDA just to kick off. We're very much a community, and then we do like that word. I think the FDA offers a whole range of services to food and drink exporters at all levels. And I think that's really important to emphasize from the beginning, that wherever you are in your exporting journey, we feel that the FDA is a good community for you to become a part of. We have a number of key services that we're known for. Many of you will know us from the international trade shows. We do a lot of representation for our members to government, which you can imagine over the last couple of years has been more key than ever. We also offer one-to-one advice, and we run various things that bring together our community in terms of connections and collaborations. A little bit of detail of the actual members. You'll see on the slide that's just coming up a whole host of logos from food and drink companies who are part of our membership. And I've highlighted the 4 that are joining us today. Important, I didn't leave those off. But also showing you that there's a real mix of companies, products, brands, established brands, new brands, as well as retailers who are selling their products internationally who work with us. So yeah, just a little reflection there of the kind of companies that we work with. There are around about 440 individual members of the FDA. So that's the sort of strength and breadth of the community. And within that, there are about 160 UK food and drink companies. So a good range. And apologies, I couldn't get everybody's logo onto one slide. So moving on to the sort of key benefits, I've done a little slide here just to give you a little bit more detail of what we showed on the first slide there. I think the first thing to point out is we are a very personable team. Nicola Thomas, my colleague, is joining us today and we'll be running the first session. And I'd like to think we're very approachable. We have good experience within the food and drink export sector. And we really do enjoy helping you to navigate your way through exports. And the membership side of things is split into 3. We have 3 tiers. So those of you that don't know us yet, we will explain at the end of the session, but there is a light membership option, which gives you a good introduction to what we do, keeps you well connected. And as someone said to me a few weeks ago, the monthly cost is less than the cost of their mobile phone bill. So hopefully good value for money. I'll come on to the events and trade shows and the service providers next, but really just to sort of emphasize that it's a resource that's there for you to use, a resource that's there. If you connect with us, you will get the most out of it. And we really try and adapt our services and come up with new ways of working with companies to really make it work for you. So moving on, the support side of things, our members help desk, I think, is really key. We take numerous phone calls, numerous emails from people looking for solutions, everything from trying to find customs agents in the EU, setting up in the EU at the moment, which you can imagine is something a lot of companies have been looking at, through to people looking for new distributors in new markets, and just general practical help around certification. Which document do I need to fill in to get my exports into a particular country? So a great way of us not necessarily knowing all the answers. I can't profess to being an expert in absolutely everything, but we certainly know the people that are out there to help you. A great bonus during lockdown has been the FDA members Zooms. We are getting our members together on a regular basis to talk through issues. And I think it's been a real benefit while people have all been working at home. You'll see by all the backdrops behind all of us today, we're all still at home. And it's been a great way of keeping people connected and realizing that actually the issues you're facing are probably being faced by a number of other people. So I think that's been a great benefit and something that we initiated as lockdown started, but we have been able to keep going with. Our premium members get extra support, one-to-one advice, annual export planning. And interestingly, the group of members I haven't mentioned yet is the sort of export service providers, who really are a truly great resource for us. And on the next slide, you'll see a whole host of logos from the people that are with us as export service providers members, everything from currency, logistics, veterinary certification, labelling, Chinese regulations. There's someone out there that can help you. The trade shows and events I mentioned is something that we're known for. Conscious of time, I won't sort of run through that in great detail, but suffice to say that if you are considering going to an international trade show, our team, together with PS8, who run the trade fair support, will probably be there or can certainly advise you on the trade shows. We run the UK pavilions at Anuga, Sial, ISM, and obviously we're pretty desperate to get back out there. But if you did want to ask about any of those, do contact us, and we can give you more details on that. And in the meantime, everything else is virtual, as you can imagine. But we're still running market workshops. We've had Meet the Buyer events. We had over 400 meetings at a 2-day online event in March, and that's been great to be able to. Well, I guess technology has allowed us to do that. Another area we are very well connected is with international distributors. And Nicola will be talking in depth in the next session about how you make those choices around distributors. But our connections there mean that we're in a good place to advise companies looking to find new partners. That's actually supported by our in-market commercial partners, who I mentioned. We've got Ben Pegner and Cameron Gordon joining us later, and they'll talk through their services in more detail. And if you click through to the next slide, a bit of a geography competition. I've put up all the flags of the areas in the world where we do have an in-market expert. I don't think I've left anyone off. Apologies if I have. But you'll see there's a reach across Europe, Asia, the ASEAN countries, China, the UAE and the US. So pretty much the main markets that UK companies are currently operating in. And before closing, just a little plug. The FTA, we are a trade association. We're a strong community, but we do also have the ability to work with you on a one-to-one bespoke basis. Our slide here shows the kind of things we can do. So very keen to talk to you if there's a project coming up where you're perhaps looking for a partner or you're just a little bit unsure about which markets in the world to prioritize. It's something that we would very much enjoy working with you on a bespoke basis, right through to in-house training, working with you, trying to build your export skills. So that's an introduction to us as the FDEA. I've put a little slide there with my personal details and a second slide with FDA's Twitter, LinkedIn and website. So you've got no excuse for not reaching out to us. So I hope that's useful. What I will do now is hand over to Nicola to host the next session. And Nicola will be joined by two of our exporters who will join her and introduce themselves. So over to you, Nicola.
Great, thanks, Sandra, and hi everybody. Sandra said I'm Nicola Thomas, and I run our commercial practice linked to the FDA. So I'm working alongside management teams to help them fast track their international business. I've spent about 25 years helping food and drink companies to set up and build high-performing distributor networks around the globe. So I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and I've got plenty of experience and lots of tips to share with you to hopefully help you avoid the traps that exporters before you may have fallen into. So in this first session, we're going to help you find your next export customer. If you could move the slides on, please, Katerina. To the next one. And importantly, when it's not just any customer, it's all about finding the one that's the best fit for your business. So when you sell overseas, you've got various routes to market that you can choose from, offering varying degrees of control and risk. And they range from using your domestic customers, a UK-based consolidator, right through to setting up your own operation in a market. But the most common route by far that you will use is via a local distributor. So that's an organization in a country who buys product from you, adds a margin, and then sells it on to an end customer like a retailer or a food service operator. So when we talk about export customers today, we're talking about distributors. We understand that most of you tuning in today are either export newbies, so you aren't exporting, but you're thinking about it. You've maybe got a few leads and inquiries on your desk, and you might be looking at today as your launch pad, or you're a dabbler or lapsed exporter. So you have or have had some export sales. You've maybe got a few distributors, but you tend to be quite reactive and maybe export something that gets done on a Friday afternoon after you've done your day job. Maybe you've had a go at export in the past, but you're probably not achieving everything that you would like to be. So the aim of this session, if you're a newbie, is to give you some ideas so that when you do start exporting, you can understand how to go about it, take some shortcuts, and make sure that you get it right first time. And if you're in that dabbler category, we want to get you thinking about being more proactive, putting some more structure and processes in place to improve your results going forward, and show you that by a little bit more commitment, you can really accelerate your success very quickly. So I'm going to talk through the theory of finding your next export customer, brackets overseas distributor, and we're going to test that theory with two real life exporters who are out there day to day on the battlefield. And firstly, Sian Holt from Fudge Kitchen. Hi, Sian.
Morning.
And Simon Ross from Penderyn Distillery. Hi, Simon.
Hi.
So Simon and Sian are both FDA members, and they very kindly agreed to share their experiences so that you can see how what I'm talking about works or doesn't work in practice. So Sian, tell us a bit about Fudge Kitchen and where you are with your exports.
Okay, so we've been established as a company for 38 years this year, which is a very long time. But we didn't really even start considering export, even the sort of dabbling element of it, until probably 7 or 8 years ago. Probably Sandra might remember the first show we did. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a bit longer now. We are, I would still probably put us in the we're exporting, but we would really like to step it up. I think our experience of export has been that, specifically with distributors, finding the right person is actually very complicated and takes a lot of time. But before you even look at finding the right person, you kind of really need to understand the role of your product within that country. because until you've gone back, to the end consumer and looked at how your price or product might match that, it's very difficult for you to understand what the routes to market might be, and therefore who the best distributor for those routes might be. So, for example, in our case, a big part of our current business in the UK is all about gifting. So we're a premium confectionery product, and quite a large part of our business goes through premium online or premium UK retailers. So we then realized that actually looking at Europe as an example, first of all, that there were very few of those that existed as a route to market. So we had to look again and say, okay, well, what are the different end points where customers are going to be picking up our kind of product? And from that, we then started to drill down on who those best distributors might be. Very much like your slide, our introduction into exporting and even our development of it has principally been done by going to trade shows. That has been the way that we've met people and learned along the way. But choosing what products, selling to whom, are the first steps really in deciding who then might be a best distributor for your products.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously today is a one step along the export journey. And you're absolutely right. It all starts with the right markets, so before you can find the right customers in those markets. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. So thanks, Sian. Simon, how about Penderyn? Tell us a little bit about your export journey to date.
Sure, thanks, Nicola. So I joined Penderyn about a year ago, the start of this last crazy year for the business and everything to do with many industries, but particularly the drinks industry and the hospitality industry globally, which essentially closed down. So Penderyn have been exporting, the company's 21 years old in September, so very young, established by a group of people who were passionate about what they wanted to do, but had no experience in the drinks business. So small company, independent, up against essentially an industry dominated by multinationals, global multinationals amongst some of the biggest on the planet, with brands that have got marketing budgets that one could only ever dream of. And I know that because I worked in those environments and on those brands before. So as a small company, essentially with a very small turnover, how do you address the challenge of international business? You pick up the phone to people who want to come and pick up a pallet and you never see it again. Or they send an email to info@Penderyn or whatever it might be. And probably the company started along that saying, that's exciting, someone's interested in our brand, let's follow that up. But in reality, that's probably, not the best place to start. And if you were doing it and not got overexcited about it, you'd sit back and you think, okay, number one, what role does the export market play in my overall business development plan? How much can I afford to produce and sell and where? And how complicated is that going to be? And what additional impact is that going to have on my operations, labeling and all that sort of jazz, which we'll come to at that point in time. But I would suggest, as Sian said, think about the consumer and where they are. I'd say actually think about in totality, what do you want export to do for your business and the brands? And I start at a point with all the folks I talk to internally and when I'm talking to potential partners around the world, that I see our brands as I would do a family, as a bunch of kids. And, I'm a responsible parent and I don't just send my children off into the outside world without knowing what school they're going to, what the teachers are like, what the curriculum's going to be, and how they will progress through kindergartens, preschool, school, university. That's the sort of structure. It's not always achievable, but that's the sort of ideal planning that you'd sort of think into, okay, I want to get into international trade. What's it going to do for me and my products? And if you can answer some of those questions and understand the impact that has on ultimately your P&L and your balance sheets, and I think that's a good place to have a view. You don't need all the answers from day one, but You know, the excitement of someone ringing up saying, I'm in Latvia, can I buy your product? Should be sort of metered in some respects, sure, but I've been in companies where they've responded to that and then lost their kids and don't know where they are, and they come back in to bite you on the backside.
Yeah, a great analogy there, Simon. And I think you're absolutely right that it's very frequent that people get carried away. Export's quite sexy. They get flattered by all this attention, but it has to start with looking at your own export capabilities and your own goals internally, and setting some parameters before you race off, responding to all these inquiries that come in. So most of us, and even larger companies, start off a bit like Sian was saying, acquiring export customers in an accidental or ad hoc way. So it comes from those emails that come in saying from a random company, or you meet somebody at a trade show or a Meet the Buyer event, and they all tell you that they are the leading, the biggest, the best distributor in their market. You're not going to meet people, or people aren't going to knock on your door saying, actually, I'm not very good, but I still want your product anyway. So they're all fantastic. And before you know it, you get busy sending out samples, working up pricing, and entering into long email and now Zoom chats with these companies. And then I think things start to snowball. And once you start selling overseas, it seems as though you generate more inquiries, which take up more of your time before you've even had a chance to stop and ask yourself whether you're actually pursuing sales in the most suitable markets, like Sian said, or whether you're with the right partner in each country. So if that's you, or that has been your story to date, you can take some comfort from the fact that you're not alone as a start point for your exports. Next slide, please. But the result is that in a couple of years, you can easily end up exporting to a number of markets on paper, but you end up with distributors who are a bit of a mixed bag. So they're mainly people, as we've been saying, who've knocked on your door, you've met at a show by chance, rather than strategically chosen partners who are a really good fit for your brand. Sometimes they start really strong, so you get a flurry of orders, but then those orders die off and fade away. One of the dangers, I think, is that your products get lost in a company's portfolio, particularly if you've gone with a bigger company. And a word of warning that some distributors do just pick up brands to stop their competitors getting hold of them. So you're not the ones that are getting all the attention and the focus. You're kind of languishing at the bottom of their catalogues. Often the people that you work with don't like to set sales targets. They'd rather suck it and see than make a commitment to you about how much they're going to achieve in a year. And interestingly, your focus tends to be on shipping orders to those companies rather than working with them to build sales. So you can be guilty of letting them get on with it without your attention, rather than supporting them and making them accountable. Often you don't really know who they sell to. They're not too keen to share their customer list with you, and you certainly don't manage key accounts jointly. And once you start doing business with a company, it's highly likely that you hand over that relationship with them to someone in your office who's maybe an admin or an export assistant, rather than working on developing a multi-level relationship across the two companies. So, Sian, do any of these characteristics apply to you in terms of distributors?
Yes,
are you guilty?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, we have been guilty of virtually all of those things. And in fact, it's very difficult, because when you start, just as you said, Nicola, you get an inquiry, or can we have a container, which would kill us, obviously, because we couldn't possibly fill a container, being a sort of premium product. We're far more into value than volume. But it is, I fear, all part of the learning curve. You're going to get these kind of things. You just need to be perhaps slightly more prepared in not jumping at some of those earlier opportunities, because actually they can sink you. Very much supporting the end retailers is important, as it is in your home market, because, and it comes back to what I was saying really, I think you'll find the right relationships in distributors once you really understand the end consumer and how they buy, and therefore what sort of distributor is going to be nurturing the kind of retailer that you need to get your products placed in. So one of the big things, I think, learning curves with us is gut feeling about whether you can work with somebody applies to distributors as it does with any other member of staff or any other outsourced supplier that you might work with. You want to feel that you can work with these people, that they understand your ethos, they really can see what makes you and your products unique, they bought into your story, and you like them. You know, you want to be doing business with people that you like. That's not necessarily the same people, as you say, who are going to give you the good sales pitch. In many ways, we had the same distributor in Holland since we very first met them at the very first trade show we did. And one of the reasons that we picked them was because they were starting out on their fine food distribution business at the same time as we were beginning our export journey. So we've kind of gone on the same journey with them. And so they had very little customer base when they started. They started and have grown exponentially ever since. But they picked products that fitted their ethos, which matched ours, and they were aiming at the end consumer that we needed to reach. But yeah, we still have the odd distribution contact or distributor that doesn't really do much, and who we don't have much of a relationship with, and who we don't really support, and it kind of either produces something or it doesn't. But they will always come and go. You know, if you find your main market or markets, those are the ones that you want to put lots of effort into, and maybe you might pick up the odd thing along the way that you choose not to put a lot of dedicated time to. And it is mostly about shipping orders, because you can't cover the whole world in one sweep.
No, absolutely. And I think you made a good point there about, you know, developing the relationships. That a lot of a mistake that we see quite often is that people have a distributor in one country and appoint somebody and they go, oh, great, I've done Spain now, I'm off to the next market, where actually the appointing of the distributor is the easy bit, and the hard work actually starts as soon as you've, you know, signed on the dotted line, with all the things that you were talking about, and, you know, working together and supporting them. As you say, you can't do that in every market, but certainly in your key markets, that's the way to go. And Simon, how about you? What does your distributor estate look like in terms of, is it a mixed bag or pretty much similar profiles?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much the same as Sian, really, a mixed bag. So we're now present in nearly 50 markets globally, of which the lead ones would be the France, Germany, the US, and maybe Australia, now that we've got a bit more tax relief as a result of another lovely free trade agreement this week. And so those people are where we would essentially try to have and treat those markets in the same way as we would do our domestic market in the UK, where you have a key account relationship, critical relationship with the key buyers. That's not always possible, especially at the moment where you can't travel, you can't visit. And I would always say, in terms of developing relationships, that's a critical part of who you choose. There are still a tail end of people who, you know, product has been sent to 3 or 4 years ago and you never heard from them since. But they're either in markets which we probably don't now have a view to thinking, well, they're super relevant to us, because our category is not growing in that market, or it doesn't offer the value in terms of high, premium value that we're seeking. Similar to Sharm, we don't trade on a lowest low value commodity basis. We look for markets which offer us a premium advantage to what we do. And then of course there are the passionistas, the people who think, the geeks who think they're whiskey specialists or drink specialists, who think they can suddenly start a business and ring you up and say, I have got no sales force, no idea, but I want to do it. And so, you have to let them down carefully. And then the other side to guard against is probably the fraudulent approaches you might get from some, let's call them more developmental type markets, probably in Africa or other places, where they will actually take your brand assets because they're simply easily accessible from the internet, and turn them into a virtual shop and say, I've got a group of shops here in Nigeria. I want to put you at the front of the queue. I need from you X, Y, Z. And so, there are these approaches which actually are time wasting, but you have to deal with them in the right way, because at some point in time, some of those markets could be important or not. So yeah, it's very much a mixed bag, but we've got a variety of tier one distributors, we would call them, who are up there with the best in some of the biggest countries, biggest drinks markets, down to the one-man bands who are actually specialists in what they do, but can deliver, so in Lithuania, for example, we deal with two different distributors who are retailers in their own right. They don't do any real distribution, but they run 3 or 4 premium whiskey shops, which is about all that Lithuania can support. But we do have a healthy business with them. It's small, but it's premium and it works. They're the sort of guys who are troubled by logistics and the impact of Brexit, and we'll come back to the post-Brexit, problems that's caused. But so it's a mixed bag. I think the other thing that you have to say for many small companies is your own resource is critical. I mean, there are 2 of us managing the world, vis-a-vis 3 or 4 people managing the UK market. So we can't spread ourselves that thinly. And we have to manage and allocate time appropriately to what we do. So yeah, very much a mixed bag. And again, the challenge for small companies is, how do you break through in a world where increasingly you're dominated by big guys with big checkbooks? But you have to find a niche. The final point to make is that as opposed, what we've probably come through, especially over the last year, has been a third channel in our business, which is not at home or out of home, but no home, is what I would call the e-commerce channel. So there are specialist distributors and retailers, platforms, marketplaces that can provide new styles of access. It's not always accessible for alcohol because of national rules and the complications of that. But for many food products and generic products, I would suggest look at marketplaces. The Amazons of this world exist in different formats on many places, and the folks in the UK, DIT, the government exporting, is great. People can help you get access to find out about those things. So there's plenty of opportunities to find out and connect with those sorts of channels if the traditional food service or the traditional retail is not available to you or through your distributors.
Great, thanks. That's really good advice. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I think you've touched on some of the pitfalls of having this kind of accidental or ad hoc approach. So this is just sort of summarizes that, why does it matter? Does it really matter if you, you just react to people, and if some of them work, that's fine. If others don't, so what? But I think if you are serious about exports and you have that approach, you're going to end up with sales which are definitely unsustainable, potentially unprofitable, and we often hear people saying that they don't have the time or resource to be proactive and do their homework. But even experienced exporters can waste lots of time responding to these ad hoc leads and inquiries, which don't go anywhere or turn out to be unsatisfactory relationships. And I think we're always quite surprised that brands would never take this approach to developing their UK business, but once they get to Dover, they kind of adopt a completely different mindset to their sales. And I think Simon touched on this point that you're really importantly, you are only as good as your distributor in a market, because they represent your company, they represent your brand. Apart from physical distribution, they offer access to contacts, to knowledge, and they provide customer service in areas that you can't. But if they mess up, it's your reputation at stake. with those end customers, with retailers, with food service operators, and with consumers. And also, if you play it right, good distributors can give you a sustainable competitive advantage, because if you can manage and motivate a distributor to focus on your products to a greater extent than your competitors' distributors are focusing on their products, you can gain market share and you can grow, which is hopefully why you're exporting in the first place. Next slide. So how do you go about finding the right partner? This is normally a one-day workshop in itself, but we're going to take you through just the basics of a 5-step process, which will help you find the best fit partner for your business rather than just any partner, and hopefully give you the best chance of success. Next, please. So the first step, as Sian alluded to before, is about finding your end customers in a market. So who do you want to supply? Is it multiple retailers, smaller chains, out of home, expat and tourist outlets, the travel sector, gifting and seasonal? And, you know, I think Sian touched on a really important point there, that don't assume because end customers exist in the UK that they will exist in your in overseas markets. You know, they might be completely different. So, you know, obviously expats is an obvious one, that British expats are in markets around the world. But some countries have, if you're in the organic sector, they have a well-developed chains of organic supermarkets. So you can basically do a whole organic shop. In the US, you have regional chains, so it might be by region rather than by sales channel. And conversely, channels like chained coffee shops, which are obviously really prevalent in the UK, in markets like Belgium and the Nordics, they have a lot more independent coffee shops, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't look to supply there, but the supply chain will be slightly different. So this, write down or find out the types of end customer that you want to supply. And so, as Sian said, this will help you determine the type of distributor that you're looking for, because obviously you want to find somebody who is not just aspiring to sell in those sales channels, but has got a proven track record of success. And if you operate in different sales channels, you might well need different distributors for each sales channel, or to potentially cover a large geography like the States. You might need different distributors for different regions. Next slide, please. So then, having identified your end customers, you can profile your ideal distributor. So what characteristics must they have? And that could be things like geographic coverage. Do they have to have national coverage? Could it be regional? Could it be focusing on key cities? Which sales channels do they supply? You know, if you want to supply 5-star hotels, obviously, if they've got references and already have existing customers who are 5-star hotels, that will be a massive help. And do they need to carry adjacent categories? So if you manufacture biscuits, would it be helpful if they were already carrying a tea brand and a jam brand? If you manufacture soft drinks, would it be helpful if they carry alcohol, and vice versa? And also, what would be a bonus? You know, if you don't have language capability, English speaking staff could be very helpful. So Sian, when it comes to looking for sort of key traits in your distributors, if you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, what sort of features would you like them to have?
Well, obviously, the first feature is we would always look at what other brands, you know, in specialty food do they cover? Do they currently carry? Because that gives you a very quick, short, sharp snap at where they are kind of pitching themselves as a specialist or not. So from our perspective, if somebody is carrying other specialty brands and they are pitched at price points that might be similar, that is something that would, you know, keep them on on the good list. But if they are predominantly supermarket brands, for us, because that's not our market, that would be an immediate no. So that looking at who else they represent is probably a very good first step, to be honest, because you can immediately rule them out if they are if their main routes and their main other brands are not aligned to your own. And at the same time as looking at at that very first stab, by looking at their brochures perhaps or at their websites, how many other products do they carry, and within your particular category. So very quickly, with literally a 5 minutes, you can do a first look and go, okay, these are worth spending some time looking at, or absolutely we need to not continue the conversation.
Yeah, that's an easy way to do a first screening, isn't it? And you can, as you say, learn an awful lot just by looking at the other brands that they carry. And how about, sorry.
I was just going to say, our second thing is that ideally we would have identified one or two key retailers, or perhaps they might be online sellers, that we would like to have our products listed in. And so we can then ask the distributor, do you supply these people? So that's another quick cover, really.
Yeah, and conversely, if you go to a trade show, you don't just meet distributors. You often meet, a small specialist shop, and if they're already working with a distributor, that's obviously a very strong way to pull product through. Is to get them to recommend distributors if they want your product as well. So, trade shows have got lots of different uses, not just for meeting distributors, but also for end customers as well. And Simon, how about you? What goes on your wish list for distributors?
Well, having worked in companies which can spend weeks and months doing a whole distributor selection process, and they've got exhaustive tools which take 6 people or 20 people to run through, in a world of a smaller business, I think you want to just focus in on 4 or 5 key questions about the company, the competition that they deal with, their access to the market in terms of sales force, marketing capability, and also their financial, good standing. If they can't afford to pay their bills, then that's a very obvious reason for being cautious about that. And that's exacerbated, I think, at the moment. Distance away from you, your terms, is something. So logistics, the whole element of how easy that is for them, and whether they're picking up in the UK, consolidating in the UK, or whether it's going to be complicated, because selling small quantities to far distant markets at the moment is super expensive, and consequences of ships getting stuck in the Suez Canal make that only all too real. So it's a challenge. But I would say, if you are in the fortunate position where you have 2 or 3 different offers, opportunities within a country or a market, have some sort of simple scorecard that you can evaluate the metrics of each one against. And then, again, at the end of the day, the selection process is based around your feel and your experience, where the gut feel. And it's complicated today by the fact you cannot go and see the in-market. There's nothing better, as you said, Nicola, from wandering supermarkets, wandering in and out of duty-free shops, or wandering, as we would do, through bars to see where products are. That someone's got to do it. But and is your distributor making an impact on that, in that world? I think the evolution of e-commerce in the last 15 months has been an opportunity to allow an expansion of ranges, and you have an ability to see into markets, a bit quicker. In the case of alcohol, many markets are driven by monopolies, so there is only one customer, and so how good is that distributor in dealing with the monopoly? Would be one of our questions, and that relates to Canada, to the Nordics, to some Asian markets as well. So be careful about market structure. But yeah, so have a simple scorecard of the things that mean the most to you, and where that potential partner rates on those features. And a simple rating of red, orange, or green, or 1 to 10 will help you evaluate who your best partner is going to be.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think, just from both your experience, you can see that, one size absolutely doesn't fit all, and it's a very different set of criteria if you're a fudge producer or an alcohol producer. So that is some great advice there. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Sian. One of our absolute must-haves at the beginning, because we just didn't know enough about it, and quite frankly, didn't want to know enough about it, was we wanted to sell in sterling. So that was absolutely on our list. We did not want to be going into the business of managing currency exchange and becoming experts in that. And, in recent years, for one reason or another, there's been so many fluctuations in that, that we determined really that is absolutely one of our must-haves.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the whole sort of starting with your export parameters as a company, setting that out. And if that is an absolute deal breaker for you, that makes some decisions further down the line quite easy. If that's non-negotiable, then you set your stall out. And I've done some work recently with a snack brand, and they said, well, we're not really prepared to adapt our packaging very much. We want to go into markets where bog standard English packaging and flavors are pretty much accepted, and that's fine. That just makes that selection process in a way very easy, because you've got a limited number of markets. So you're absolutely right. Setting out strong parameters and sticking to them, I think, is another key to success in all of this.
And especially when you're starting, it makes it more straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can always. They're not set in stone forever, are they? You can always review as you go along.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So we've been talking already. Sian and Simon have given us some great ideas onto where to find these ideal partners and these short lists of potential candidates. And I should say that by all means, if you've got existing leads or even these existing distributors who may not be performing brilliantly for any number of reasons, do put them into the pot if they fit the criteria that you've just set yourself. So you don't need to just dump them without giving them a second thought. By all means, include them if they're suitable. And as Simon said, unfortunately, we can't be cruising supermarket aisles or bars and restaurants overseas at the moment. But when we can get back out there, supermarket aisles are a fantastic source of importers in the similar types of products to the ones that you carry, because you just have to look on the back of packs, and you can not only, by picking up the pack, learn so much about the products, but also who imports them. Also, you can look at your competitors' websites, but I think more importantly, look at players in adjacent categories. So if you are, for example, like Simon, a whiskey producer, if you look at UK producers or an international producer of say, cider and beer, that might give you an indication of who the key alcohol importers are in a certain market. And use your network. I think Sandra said right at the beginning that, one of the benefits of a community like the FDA is that members are very generous in terms of sharing who they know in a market, and will happily give recommendations most of the time. It's worth trying your own trade association, both in the UK and also their counterparts overseas. That has mixed success, I think, in terms of actually coming up with names of potential distributors. And then, of course, shows, marketplaces and events that we've already mentioned. And Sandra and her team, when they are at shows, physical shows, normally, they spend their whole time connecting UK exhibitors to overseas distributors. And as Sandra said, she's doing that at the moment through our series of virtual Meet the Buyer events. Next slide, please. So the next stage is to preferably is to conduct a beauty parade, preferably in market. You need to see the companies in situ. And you need to see that those shiny warehouses and the smiling staff on their website really do exist. And that sounds like a bit of an obvious thing to say, but believe me, certainly in the early days of the internet, it was very easy to disguise the fact that you were, almost operating out of a back bedroom or a car park with a nice website front. So you need to, and look at make sure that the integrity of their supply chain, particularly if you've got frozen and chilled products. So it is really important to visit these people at their premises if you possibly can. Also remember, it is a two-way conversation. It's like any buyer meeting. It's not just about you persuading them to take your product. You want to make sure that they are this absolute best fit that we keep talking about, and that they're hungry for your business and for your brand. So one of the things that I would recommend is to, send them a checklist up front, a list of questions that you would like answered either beforehand or when you meet them. So what opportunities do they see for your products? Where do they fit into their current activities? Can they give examples of a brand that they've taken from zero to hero in their market? How do they support brands? Who are your competitors in their marketplace, and how do they compete against them? And there's this has a dual purpose, because once you've done that, you can convert that checklist into a sort of a standard questionnaire to send out to all those companies who make those ad hoc inquiries, or who you meet at a trade show, who seem so excited and so interested in your product when you meet them or when they email you. But you would be amazed that if you push back to them with a questionnaire that digs a bit deeper into their business, it soon sorts out the serious ones from the time wasters. And don't forget that distributors get approached by tens of brands like yours every single week. And so you're going to have to impress them as well. You need to demonstrate that you've done your homework, you've researched the market, you've identified potential gaps and where your products could fit in. They want to work with brands that are going to make life easy for them. So make sure you do your homework, and assuming that all the potential candidates that you've met, that they have really got warehouses and they all still seem like a good fit, rank them, as Simon said, and go for your first choice. And next slide, please. And finally, as Simon alluded to, do your due diligence. And, this, again, it's very easy to get kind of carried away in all the excitement of finding a distributor. But it's really important that you take out references, both with that company's customers, but also with other brands that they work with. As Simon said, check their financial standing to ensure that they're sound, that they can pay you, do a credit check. It's a lot harder to go and collect a bad debt or chase a bad debt in Bombay than it is in Birmingham. So that is a really important thing to do. And also, have some sort of a distribution agreement. Don't be tempted to think that, because they were really nice people, and that you don't need something in writing because they seem trustworthy. You do have to have something. It doesn't need to be war and peace, but you do need something that protects you, that formalizes your partnership and sets out the obligations for each party. So as a very minimum, it should define, the geography that distributor can operate within, the channels that they can supply, minimum order quantities, pricing structures, confirmation they won't sell competing products, when they're going to pay you, how they're going to pay you, and also critically, how you can terminate, both of you can terminate the agreement if it all goes pear-shaped. So next slide, please. Thanks. So the reason I haven't asked Sian and Simon to just comment on those last two slides, obviously we're coming near to the end of the session. I'm just conscious of time, but I think we've picked up a lot of those points as we've gone along. And so hopefully you've got a blueprint that you can use in every market. And as Sian and Simon have demonstrated, the reality doesn't always mirror the theory that I've outlined. But if you work through those basic steps and you put some more structure around finding your customers, I think you'll be well on the way to ending up with better fit distributors, building more sustainable exports and getting better results. And as I said before, do remember one final point is that, the appointing the distributor is just the start of it. It's not just get them signed up and move on to the next market. That's when the hard work starts for you. You've got to spend time with them, getting to know them, building the relationship, setting goals, helping them achieve goals. But that's another workshop in itself. If there are any questions, we can take them now or we can take them later. I'll put up my contact details as well on the screen so you can contact me directly. But I would just like to thank both Sian and Simon for sharing your experiences. It's been really great. And I think you've been so candid in, how building an export business works in practice. So thank you both very, very much.
No worries. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, thanks. And I'll hand back to you, Sandra.
That's great. Thank you, Nicola. And thank you to Sian and to Simon as well. In fact, we picked two very sort of topical companies. Apparently today is National Fudge Day. So I think in honour of Sian's contribution, we all ought to rush out and buy some fudge. And I think Wales are playing in the football as well today, aren't they? So a glass of Welsh whiskey with the football might be a good idea. What we're going to do now is we've got around about half an hour to have a conversation with two more of our FDA members. Delighted to welcome Adam from Joe and Seth's and also to Kath from Beaver Farm. I'll leave you both to introduce yourselves. Perhaps Kath, ladies first. Do we go with you?
Thank you very much. Good to see you both. So I'm Kath White. I joined Beaver Farm Drinks almost 2 years ago now. I head up the international team. We're a team of 3, and our turnover in exports is around the 5 million mark. So we trade with about 20 countries actively. Previous to that, I was with Tyrrell's Crisps for 12 years. So very familiar with the FDA and the good work you do. So that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Kath. Yeah, and Adam.
I'm Adam, co-founder of Joe and Seth's. We make fantastic gourmet popcorn in a whole range of different flavours, and we export now to around 19 countries. It's about 30% of our business and growing. So yeah, kind of keen to keep that momentum, and so we're building the capability in export quite a bit over the next 12 months.
Yeah, excellent, good stuff. And I know you've both just joined this session recently, and the session previously was very much about those companies that were sort of starting out on their export journey. But I think a lot of the similarities in what we will explore in this area will be interesting to get your take and how it compares to what these guys have been saying. I guess sort of first question is, you're both brands that are well known in the UK, and you've built an international business. What advice would you really give to a company on assessing their export capabilities before they get started, from your own experience? Perhaps Adam, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of sort of looking internally, both operationally and at your sort of sales capability and marketing capability as well. So operationally, we manufacture, we warehouse, so we have our entire kind of supply chain under one roof, really. And so for us, if a particular distributor in a country asks for additional labeling or different barcodes or whatever it might be, we've got the ability to do it. It might be quite costly and we need to allow for it, but we've got the capability to do that in-house. There are obviously people who can do that externally for you, but operationally, I think it's something that you need to sort of know what you're able to do and what you're willing to do. And then from a sales and marketing perspective, probably that would help determine, like, depending on the size of your team and the resource you've got available, might determine the strategy as to whether you go and appoint, for example, one distributor in a territory, or whether you might want to work with an agent, or whether you actually want to go direct, or even a mixture of the three, depending on how complicated you want to go. So yeah, the more resource you have, the more kind of ability you have to be a bit more nimble. And certainly in our case, we aren't the sort of brand that can go exclusive distribution, one country, one company, because it's very rare that one distributor will have the ability to supply into the variety of channels that we work with. So we do everything from bars to hotels to probably a bit like Kath, to cinemas to grocery as well. And that's quite rare that you would have one company that's able to do that.
Yeah, Kath.
Okay. I'd say if you're starting out with a good quality product or a great brand, you will be in demand, as alluded to in the last session. Whether it's via trade shows, people will in international markets will be interested in your brand. So I think the first step is, is the desire there to export, which might seem like a daft question to ask, but I'd go as far as saying, it isn't for the faint-hearted, but the benefits can be huge in terms of spreading risk and dealing with some really valuable customers that can add to your bottom line. Take a good hard look at your product. Will it work in export markets practically, shelf life wise, technically? Does your name work in export markets? I mean, I've worked for a company called Tyrrell's. What does that mean? But it worked. My current role, it means beautiful view in French, but it's actually pronounced beaver, the Vale of Beaver locally. So, the name doesn't always need to stack up, but does your product resonate, and is there an opportunity for an export markets? I think most of the time, the answer to that would be yes, there will be a gap. And it's a really exciting journey, but I'd say, to get the business wholeheartedly behind exports, because it does add complexity. It requires flexibility. The business will need to adapt. It was interesting listening to a point in the earlier session about a brand that only wanted to go into export markets where there were no packaging adaptations required. Well, I'm struggling to think of a market where that is the case post-Brexit and with all the new rules we face. But if you don't want to label your product, then you'll work with somebody who will have to label it at some point, which obviously adds a level into your value chain. So I think be very open-minded about the levels of flexibility and adaptation involved, and then just commit to it, because it's so much fun. Yes, there will be frustrations along the line, but there are some incredible distributors out there who are such professionals and will open your eyes to such new opportunities, retailers who might want to work directly with you. So if you can bring the business with you, because it will impact every part of your business, from finance to marketing to production especially, it is the most brilliant journey.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I know it's, ironically, it's probably a harder task for bigger brands where the UK multiples dominate so much of their sales. The export is actually a very small percentage. And I know a lot of them sort of, have to push quite hard with the board to get, the recognition that export deserves. So I think in a way, a lot of smaller brands who, are a number of people on this audience, they can make those decisions themselves. But you're right, they need to know they've got the capability to be able to do that.
I'd also say, I mean, having spoken to, spoken to very experienced people in the food and drink industry, they would almost say, well, maybe don't look at it as export as such. Yes, there will be kind of export practicality to do with the logistics, but if your brand works in a retail environment in the UK, have a look, for example, at the USA and at Whole Foods or Publix or Wegmans in the US. And whilst there might be packaging adaptations, if your brand is on trend and timely and making great headway within your niche, why wouldn't those buyers want to talk to you? So, whether it's via distributor or direct to retail, it was the founder of Pop Chips who opened my eyes to that, where it was just think of where else it could work and don't be afraid of it, because if you're doing something truly special, they'll want a part of that.
I think that translates very well to you, Adam, doesn't it? I think is that what you find? You've obviously built a very strong UK brand in a sector that, well, I don't know, did you create it? It probably didn't exist much before you guys came along.
I'll definitely claim to have created it. I think it was a mixture of probably a bit of Tyrrell's, a bit of Metcalfe's, a bit of a few brands at the time, all having a crack at popcorn that sort of created it. But yeah, I think it is. I think it's so for us, it's always been. I mean, our journey started in export when 3 or 4 years in, we realised that actually the UK wasn't quite ready for gourmet popcorn, or certainly wasn't quite as ready as, for example, the UAE at the time or the US, which were really established popcorn markets. And it was only really when we sort of started taking export orders, kind of as you do, kind of without really thinking about it, that we went, oh, hold on a second, maybe we should be focusing it elsewhere first. And I think, yeah, there was a realization that there are lots of customers around the world in lots of different channels that might be right for Joe and Seth, and maybe even before a lot of the UK customers are as well.
Yeah, interesting. And I think, Cass, one of the things I think about with Beaver is, you very much got a story of you've got a story of provenance, heritage. Mm-hmm. Those credentials are all very, very sort of key to Beaver. Is that something that translates internationally as well, or does it become more of just a drinks brand when you take it overseas?
Oh, absolutely. I think the provenance, the fact that the elderflowers are picked by the community, the fact that they're picked in the Vale of Beaver, it's very much part of the story. And Pev, our owner, founder, he started out almost with export as part of his channel mix from the outset, and was out at the trade shows. And he was stood there saying, "It's my business. My mum used to pick the elderflowers around the garden. It all started at my kitchen table." And whilst it's grown into quite a different thing now, buyers or the owners of a distributor really that really plays well. And for markets like Japan, for example, it's been pivotal, I'd say. And Pev going out there dealing with his kind of head-to-head equivalent holds such kudos and strength. And we've been trading with our Japanese distributor for many, many years. And whilst, we deal with a separate team day to day, Pev still has that one-to-one contact really with the owners of the business. So I'd say, yes, so it's a really big part of that initial selling. I'd say the product, recipe, the flavors also play a key part. And, along with popcorn, with any, I guess, exciting food and drink channel, flavor innovation and being ahead of on the trends is key. So, for example, there's so much growth now in the no low alcohol channel, which isn't a new thing by a long way, but there are you could segment that into so many different bits. But we found that some of our overtly marketed no alcohol options are really interesting to some of our export customers, because whilst we might think we're ahead of the curve, they're not. So where they sell our brand already, it's a good way, an easy way for them to play in that trend by bringing in 2 or 3 of our no alcohol lines. So the provenance is key, but yeah, there's a lot more as well, in terms of your product credentials and USPs linked to those.
Yeah. Very good. And I think that definitely does translate into snacking, which I guess, Adam, sort of leads to the question about UK trends and how they translate internationally. Obviously, we're known as a nation of snackers. I think we're very innovative in the snacking section. Is that something you think gives you an advantage? Do distributors come looking for you in the UK?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, actually. So I think that, first of all, there's something for all brands that are on the call that are great British exporters. The brand GB really does count for something. And I think the first time I realised that was when I was walking around probably one of your shows, Sandra, in Anuga or one of these ISMs, and you go around and you see the different pavilions, and the great branding is really strong. and it attracts a lot of the buyers to that space. So I do think there is from GB brands are known for their quality, they're known for their great design and innovation, etc. So people do seek out GB brands, and generally, I think for snacking in particular, what we find is probably the same in drinks. Scandinavia tends to lead in terms of we find in terms of trends and innovation. So for us, it always seems to be the sort of market that where you've got a newer product. Scandinavia tends to be the region where they would possibly give it a go first. Still after the UK often, but certainly one of the first. And then kind of thinking farther afield, I think certainly in Asia and Middle East, the GB branding in particular is really strong out there, and anything with a sort of British slant works particularly well. But yeah, our flavour profiles are really interesting. So we have over 70 odd flavours now, and it's really interesting sort of mapping those on a globe and seeing which ones work really well in which different markets. Broadly, everyone loves caramel, or salted caramel, but there are specific niches in different countries that are really interesting to look at.
Yeah, very good. Interesting to see what comes next as well. I guess it leads to a question someone has asked about, are there certain countries that are easier to navigate, which I guess for new exporters, would you say, let's all go to the US first? Or not? Kath, what's your thoughts on that?
I'd come back to, again, your product, your niche and your opportunity. And if you've got a really robust sell story and role in the UK market with some reputable retailers, for example, like Waitrose, Ocado, Whole Foods, Booths, and the big market. It's not necessarily about scale, but if you might be an emerging brand, but you're doing something really exciting, or you're an established brand that can offer something to a big category in another market. So if I give you the example of, Tyrrell's, we were in all the major malts in the UK as a premium crisp, but whereas in France, whilst they had a couple of local premium producers, they were pretty small scale. So we partnered with a very big distributor in France because there wasn't a premium crisp category, and the distributor was selected to take us, fully into that category, and we dominated it and basically created this premium category. And our aspiration is to do the same with the same distributor with Beaver in France, where they have some premium lemonades, but as a category, it isn't that well developed in terms of a premium offer. So it might not necessarily be what is the easiest market, but what is the most, what is the market with the biggest opportunity for you and your product? Now, yes, different markets, there are some that are easier to enter than others. So I'd almost start from that point though. And, you might look at the US and say, for example, you make fermented drinks. I remember going into a Whole Foods near Bryant's Park in New York, and there was more kombucha on offer than waters and orange juices and plain drinks. But yeah, it's all about your niche. So you might feel, well, some Scandinavian markets might be easier to crack, to your point earlier. However, I'd say in terms of complexity, for example, we have great success in Australia. Now, whilst that's a long way to ship your products, we go direct to retail. And whilst they do require a bespoke back label, I'd say that is one of the easiest markets for us in terms of market entry and legislation. I'd say one of the most complex, some of the most complex markets would be some of the EU ones post-Brexit, but that's all settling down. And we sell a lot of organics, and there's extra documentation and kind of traceability going on there. It is settling down now. Once you get into your groove, obviously it becomes the norm, but I definitely start with that category piece. And, if you're set up volume-wise and capability-wise to, bolt on some good extra volumes to your business, and you're willing to make packaging changes, maybe the most obvious ones, or obvious to you, might not be the first ones you should go after, simply because the opportunity just isn't there, and it's somewhere like Australia for us.
No, that's really interesting to hear, and very, very topical with free trade agreements at the
Indeed,
moment. Yeah, Adam, you sell into some interesting niches. I know I've been on EasyJet flights before and seen children sitting in front of me eating their popcorn as a treat. How do you go about sort of finding those little niches that might not be immediately obvious?
I wish I could say I had a black book or hired someone like Kath who could come and tell us the answers. But no, the answer has been hard graft, to be honest. It's been LinkedIn, it's been trade shows, and I think the interesting thing about it is, if you take airlines as an example, it's no different to cinemas or grocery. You want to prove that the product works in that channel in every possible way first, in particular on airlines. Operationally, the packs aren't going to explode in the air, or the pressure from the air pressure, and actually people do want to consume them at 35,000 feet, and they know your brand well enough to buy it from a picture, not holding it. So you kind of want to prove, if you can get a case study on all those different types of customers, suddenly it opens up all of the others. And that's really how we've gone about, we're in our 11th year now, and it has been very incremental, kind of try a new channel, try a new country, prove it, tweak probably, and then go and really push that channel and pull that country a bit harder. And I think it's worked really well for us. It's meant that we haven't had any big failures, touch wood, and we've continued to kind of grow and build great relationships with all the different partners we work with, as opposed to kind of maybe going big bang and losing some distribution and kind of tarnishing the brand in some territories as well. So, but yeah, it's hard graft, and I think often, and I've got no experience of FMCG food or export, so and none of the team that we recruited to help build export as a channel did either. So it does say that anyone can do it. It might take a bit longer, but the same principles of building great relationships, kind of being passionate about your products, and having a fantastic, innovative, different product that it does give you a distributor or retailer point of difference, I think, are all the key elements.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think, often the big world of export and saying that, China has opportunity, India has opportunity. Obviously, they're tricky markets that need a lot of experience, a lot of time. And I think some of the markets that you've mentioned that you are all active in, so some of the European countries, the Middle East, the Scandinavian markets, I think are probably better starter markets for companies to build their confidence, because they can visit, they can support, etc.
I think it's your point about the US. That's kind of is really interesting. It's the biggest market for popcorn in the world, right? And so you're starting out, you're going, I'm going to go there. There's an awful lot of popcorn in the US, and the US is an awfully big country. And so we've only started in the US in the last 6 to 12 months, and we've got some really exciting launches and plans there. But I think you've got to do it when you're ready, and you've got the ability to ship kind of significant volumes of stock, and kind of proving yourselves a little bit as well, because it is the sort of place where you can lose your shirts.
Yes, indeed. Very good advice. I think e-commerce has obviously been very much in the news. I think whilst we've all been sitting at home, the growth in e-commerce has been phenomenal. Is that something that's translated for you into more sales in international markets? Kath, maybe?
Yeah. So I'd say, I wouldn't say we're primarily an e-commerce isn't the primary source of our brand. We end up online because we have physical distribution in, for example, the likes of Coles and Woolworths in Australia, or Whole Foods in the States, or Monoprix in France. We and Amazon is kind of a key part of the mix in some markets as well, for example, like France. But I'd say traditionally, yes, we're more kind of retail based. However, in Asian markets, so we're in Japan and Singapore and Hong Kong, and Singapore in particular. Online Redmart, for example, is really important, and in Japan. So historically, with Tyrrell's, we traded with China for many years, and online was a huge part of the mix there, as you can imagine. But what we are finding is, for example, where in markets like the US, where we've got a fair few years of trading under our belts, we're now investing in online marketing support. So things like curbside pickup, Instacart, especially throughout lockdown, where people were doing a lot more online shopping. So adapting the marketing to focus more on online support. We've all seen the stats about the number of people who are shopping online versus going to the store. I know that's leveled out now, but yeah, there's the e-commerce piece, but also if you are a traditional kind of on-shelf brand, think about how you can support your sales online, because it has definitely nudged forward since lockdown.
Yeah. Adam, I think it's been quite a big part of your, well, it must have impacted you quite dramatically, everything Brexit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think to D2C, with COVID, D2C became a huge part of the business, because really have a choice. A lot of our, apart from grocery, everything just sort of disappeared. And it's been actually really great in terms of the opportunity. We've really focused the whole business on that channel, and it's become a big part of our mix, which is really cool. And internationally, it's been really exciting to see kind of people, which countries they're ordering from. It gives us some good insights as to where the brand is stronger, weaker, what flavors, etc. So, and we do trade with Amazon as well. And so you can kind of, it works. It is a big part of our mix now. Brexit has, it started the year kind of kept the our Journalist's website live, continuing to ship direct to EU customers. That lasted about 3 days, and then all of our couriers decided that they couldn't do it anymore. So we sort of stopped for about 2 to 3 weeks. They then figured out how everything works, started again at the end of January, and then all was going really well. And then some new rules came in around composite products, which popcorn is. It's a kind of dairy and plant-based product. So, which has sort of messed everything up again. So we are sort of yo-yoing a little bit between, and at the moment we've turned off our website channel, and we're actually about to launch a new solution that will mean that we can actually continue to supply our EU kind of customers. So we'll get there. It's painful, but and it's been kind of lots of firefighting. But we've turned it off because it's just not worth damaging the customer experience anymore. But I'm confident we'll be back on in about 4 to 6 weeks, and it will work. So watch this space.
No, well done. I know it's not been an easy thing to navigate, and we've certainly been running lots of FDA sessions trying to keep people up to speed with what they have to do. It's not been easy. We've had a question come in about how you find distributors, and is it a case of Googling, which is an interesting starting point, I guess. Kath, if you as a business decided that you were looking to get into a new market, perhaps talk us through your, how would you go about finding the right people to service the niche that you'd identified?
So, I mean, just my own experience, absolutely leaning on the likes of yourselves. Paid up members have access to real experts. I know kind of Elsa's retired now, hasn't she? But, your team are daily speaking to food manufacturers who, and are very discreet in terms of, competing brands, but being able to advise and name names that are reputable distributors in the market, and saying, well, have you chatted to so and so? Why don't you chat to so and so? And your workshops and your events are great for that and can cut out a lot of time. We would probably look at just pretty straightforward market research. Who are your competitors as UK brands? Are they in export markets? And then look at your local competitor set. Where are they sold in terms of retail, and work back. But I'd say events are also key. LinkedIn, for whatever the fee is every month to upgrade to premium, is about £20, is great. There are lists out there of distributors. You have to do a lot of legwork to work through them. But I'd say just sweat the premium food and drink network, or whichever channel you're in, and just speak to people who aren't competitors. I had a great chat with Luby at T-Pigs the other day, and we swapped 2 or 3 really great distributor names, either in markets where we don't operate already or markets they don't operate already. I mean, that was free, and we'll meet up for a coffee when we can. And then, I guess, sweating the network is one of the most valuable things you can do. I
like that phrase. I'll use that. Sweating the network. That's
not a very attractive phrase, is it? But...
Yeah, no, but it's right. And I think it's interesting. You mentioned trade shows, and I know that's one of the sort of hidden benefits of being in a UK national stand, is that willingness to share. And you're right, unless it's a direct competitor, your distributor's looking for something to add to his range. Making those kind of introductions across the team is really valuable. Just flipping that on its head, maybe, Adam, we also get asked quite often, how do you get rid of a distributor that's not performing, or how do you manage them? Have you got any insights of having to do that? What you would suggest?
I haven't really had a situation where it's been we've sort of had to force the situation. It hasn't been particularly amicable. I think it tends to be the case that things kind of go one or two ways. Either the sales are no good, and actually it doesn't make sense for them as well as you to continue operating, distributing your brand anyway. So it's kind of a conversation that one or the other of you would be expecting to have. Or if things are going really well but they're not offering you enough support and you want to be something bigger, etc. Often they've been in that situation already, and had those difficult conversations with another brand, and so would expect it, and would have a kind of number of counters of things that they might be open to doing. I guess with distributors, I think it's just about the dialogue and keeping those conversations alive. Like I say, I don't know, maybe we've been particularly lucky. We haven't really had a situation where we've had to sort of get contracts out and legals and things like that. It's always been relatively amicable. So not sure. I don't know if Kath, maybe you've got probably some examples from Tyrrell's, I would expect.
I think there's a textbook. I did the Institute of Export qualification many years ago, and there's a textbook approach to it where you have your contracts and everything's outlined. Many distributors don't want to sign contracts, and you can try until you're blue in the face. So you maybe end up in this limbo where there's kind of an understanding of what each other wants, and then if you get to a point where you think, well, actually, I've gone as far as I think I can go with this distributor. My issues with them are this, and this, and you might have done in parallel. You found another one. It has to happen, and from what I've seen or where I've been directly involved, it isn't easy, and it has been messy. But if they genuinely aren't helping you achieve your aspirations, and they haven't signed up to a contract, they will use their country's law to try and fight it. You bring in your best legal people to try and fight it, and you just have to try and put it to bed without it costing too much and without damaging reputation. I mean, I've had instances where a distributor's just started producing his own version, own private label version of the brand we were making, and kind of gives you a bit more ammunition to wrap it up, really. But, yeah, it's not the easiest, and really try hard to get a contract in place. I mean, even with contracts, if there's a lot of a lot of growth has gone on in the market, and there's been a lot of investment in the brand, that, you know, a sole distributor will always argue the case. But we have some great legal contacts, and you know, fortunately, they're not our examples with Beaver. You know, there's been a couple in the last 3 years where we've had to wrap it up for very good reason, really, and you kind of try and set a time scale and just try and do it as swiftly as possible, really. So you know, in the interest of growth, it's just something that you have to do sometimes because they weren't the right one.
No, that's really valuable. Thank you. And I think those kind of insights from both of you as exporters with experience, I'm sure, are very, very well received. I'm conscious that sounds like we're finishing on a negative, so I don't want to do that, because that was like what happens if it goes wrong? So yeah, maybe a quick sort of summing up from both of you in terms of, you know, what you see as next internationally for you both as brands. Perhaps Adam, start with you.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity now post-COVID with premium products, with kind of strong brand identities that are kind of different. I think that what we're seeing is, coming out of COVID, everyone is spending more on kind of indulgence. Whether that be a restaurant where, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure everyone is doing it at the moment. You go out for a meal, you might only usually have one course or two courses. You're having all three and a bottle of wine. Everyone just wants to treat themselves. I think there's a huge opportunity for that, I think, this year. And so we'll be kind of pushing that agenda with all of the different countries that we work in. We've got one big launch in the US in terms of new markets, which is a big one for us. But everywhere else, we're very much building and cementing what we already do, and just making sure we do it better before we then launch again, hopefully into some more countries next year.
Good news, yeah. And Kath, final word to you.
Oh yeah, following on from the point about distributors, you know, within the last couple of years, we've appointed a new one in the US and France. So that's a huge focus for us in terms of making that work. But also, don't be afraid of the direct to retail route. If the volumes work for you, it can be a really great relationship. You might be used to dealing with retailers in the UK. It's working well for us in a couple of markets. And I'd say, in the new world of Brexit and some legislation, get yourselves really organized with, you know, pretty straightforward things like, you know, your product dimensions, your palette specs, all of that sort of thing. Because even with markets like Scandinavia now, we've just got a new distributor in Norway, and the amount of information that they need is pretty mind-blowing. But it's all there at your fingertips. It might be just sat with a technical team, or it might be sat with somebody else. Maybe spend a day pulling that all together as part of your kind of export mission, because it'll save you loads of time and stress as well. And yeah, as I said earlier, you know, if the desire's there, take the business with you, but be ready to be really flexible and just speak to people like Adam, myself. You know, you asked us finding distributors. We might not have all the answers, but maybe we can help with lots of shortcuts. But it might be a bit cagey if you're in the soft drinks industry.
Yes, I totally understand. No, that's really good advice. And thank you both for giving up your time. I know how busy everybody is and coping with everything that life's been throwing at us over the last year and a half. But no, very, very grateful to you both. Both good FDA members. And look forward to seeing you in person sometime, hopefully at a trade show or an event in the future. Thank you both.
Thanks, Sandra.
Great. Well, I hope you found that interesting. I'm sure you did. I certainly did. And you know, it's great to see how open both of them were prepared to be with you. One what we're going to do now, we're going to move on to the last session. And before we do, I just put up a couple of statistics, which may be a little bit blurry on your screens. Normally we share stats which the Food and Drink Federation pull together on an annual and quarterly basis. But I thought it was just a good idea to show you the top markets that UK food and drink products are sold to. Now, unfortunately, they don't make very good reading for 2020. Everything pretty much on a downturn. But in terms of the size of the markets, it does pretty much reflect still where the strongest markets are for UK products. Now, whiskey is a huge part of that, so it does skew the figures a little bit. But I think it's interesting to see that, you know, a number of the markets that we mentioned, places like the UAE, Australia, the US, from outside of Europe, are all very strong. Next slide, please. The next slide shows you the top 10 products, and as I say, you can see how whiskey, until recently, you know, again on a bit of a downturn, but it's such a huge part of what we do. But it's the products underneath that I think are ones that we are very keen to highlight. Things like chocolate, breakfast cereals, soft drinks, you know, biscuits are strong from the UK, dairy is strong from the UK, meat is obviously very strong. And within the membership, we have, for our premium members, we do run an export statistics service where we can pull out your key HS codes and tell you where in the world those codes are selling. So it's a good part of the research that we talked about previously in Nicola's session. So, Nicola, I think we're going to invite you to come back to the mic now, and really just sort of help us talk through the opportunities outside of the EU. You'll see, I mean, we've talked about Brexit. I think now's sort of not particularly the day, I guess, to do all of that. But, you know, it has had a big impact on all UK food and drink exporters. The sheer volume of paperwork and everything that's been necessary to adapt business models to cope with the new world. You know, the pandemic has clearly meant a huge loss in hospitality trade. But on the positive, there has been growth in e-commerce, and businesses have been able to adapt to that. And obviously, we've all managed to move online. And it's actually meant that we've seen an awful lot more of our in-market partners than perhaps we would do in the normal world. So, yeah, I don't know if do we still want to take the quick comfort break? I think that came up and disappeared. Or are we happy just to press on? I think, Nicola, if you're happy, then
I'm happy. I had my comfort break while you were chatting, so I'm okay.
Good. Okay, I'll pass over to you then. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, we'll press on. So yeah, welcome to our final session today, which is all about selling beyond the EU. You'll have seen from those stats that Sandra just flashed up that most of our UK food and drink exports inevitably go to the EU, but it probably also comes as no surprise that UK exporters are increasingly looking further afield for new customers. This is due in part to the new trading landscape post-Brexit. I think, you know, the feedback that we're getting from our members 5.5 months in now is that it has been really tough, but they are getting through, they're finding new ways of working, and they've sort of got through a lot of the teething problems, certainly anything that they can influence themselves. They've, you know, by and large cracked it. And I think, but it's perhaps putting new exporters off, that if people are starting with a blank sheet of paper, they are sort of tending to avoid the EU at the moment and look further afield. Or another factor is that the post-pandemic global pressures are beginning to ease, albeit sporadically. Asia, for example, and food service in Asia was one of the first sectors to shut down in early 2020, but was again, as a result of that, was one of the first to open up again, even though they've had a few hiccups in the last couple of months. And also, as we've seen in recent months, weeks, and as recently as yesterday, the promise of new free trade agreements, which may potentially open up new opportunities for exporters once some of those trading barriers which have traditionally existed come down. And although the EU is often a first port of call for many exporters, we would always advocate building a balanced portfolio of markets across the globe to make yourselves less vulnerable and reduce your risk. Obviously, if you're only selling in one region and the consumer spending or the economy in that region takes a nosedive, or gluten-free stops growing as a category, you're going to be left very, very exposed. And it's then quite difficult to start afresh in a new market or new region, given how long it takes to build up sales in new markets. So this is where our in-market partners, who Sandra mentioned right at the top of the session, are invaluable and in helping you work out where the opportunities are, and also alerting you to some of the challenges so that you can shortcut them and not make mistakes that have been made by other exporters ahead of you. So I think we're going to bring back introduce you to two of our in-market partners today, to Ben Pegner from Richmond Enterprises and Cameron Gordon from Insight. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Nicola, how are you doing? You well?
I'm good, and you too?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
And Cameron's joining us from, it's nearly bedtime for him. He's in New Zealand, so hopefully he's still awake. Yeah, I think we're going to talk to Ben first anyway. So, the UAE is often the next port of call after companies have looked at the EU. I think, Ben, people look at the EU, they see the sunshine, they see the 5, 6, 7-star hotels. Hey, Cameron.
How are you doing?
Hi, good evening.
Good
Almost
evening.
good night for you. So just saying that, we see the UAE, people have this vision that, it's very rich, it's full of rich expats and tourists. But I think I'm going to hand straight over to you, Ben. I think you're going to confirm or dispel that myth perhaps for us.
Yep, I'll crack on then, shall I?
Yep.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nicola. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm just going to talk you through a bit of background to the UAE, the GCC, where the UAE is, the Middle East in general, and then maybe just talk about routes to market and some of the opportunities that are open to you. So bear with me while I try and share this presentation. Okay. What can you see at the moment?
We can just see your screen with the Crowdcast page. If you click on the PowerPoint, then.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, and that's it. And if you go into presenter view, then you can get started.
Yeah,
that's
can you see it okay?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks for bearing with me there. Okay, so our company is called Richmond Enterprises. We're based in Dubai. For those of you that have been there, we're on the Sheikh Zayed Road. So that's just down from the trade center where the trade shows like Gulf Food happen every year. And we've been in the Middle East since 1984. So we moved there as a family. And then my father started Richmond Enterprises about 20 years ago. So prior to that, he was working into the region from the 1970s. So we've got a lot of expertise and experience working in the region. What we do is we help companies like yourselves access that market. We help you understand the market and perhaps present strategies where you can work out if it's right for you, which is the best strategy for you. And we do that primarily with two divisions. We have a health and a pharma and a medical side of the business. And then we have the FMCG, the food and beverages. And I've just got a couple of photos up there. We've been working with Walker's Shortbread this is our 19th year. We represent them in 16 countries across all the travel retail, all the duty frees, and across the 4 major regional airlines, so Etihad, Emirates, Qatar, and Gulf Air. And what we do for them, for example, we're their regional office. They don't want to have any fixed overheads. They don't want to send somebody out to live in the Middle East and get up to speed. They instead can work with us. They leverage our relationships and our network, our existing relationships and our new ones that we develop alongside them. They use our expertise and our experience, and together we've accessed the market and grown their brand across the whole of the Middle East and into North Africa as well. So, you know, the roles that we play as an organization will help you plot that route to market, whether that be direct to retail, that was just mentioned in the segment before at the end there, or through a distributor, or if we're talking HoReCa and food service, there might be a slightly different route, or through a food service distributor. And then we'll build and brand build alongside you over the ensuing period of time. So, you know, Gojo, Purell, we're in our 18th year working with them. Walkers, as I mentioned, our 19th year, and some of those other brands there you see from Europe and the UK we've been with for a long time as well. We tend to, you know, I think people understand the relevance and the expertise and the opportunities that we can open up for them. And leveraging on somebody, on the relationships that someone like us has, enables you to enter a market in a relatively risk-free way. You know, you don't have to set out your stall completely. You can just dip your toe into the water, which is part of the option that someone like us provides. So, giving you a bit of background on the region, some of you might know it very well. The United Arab Emirates, so Dubai is one of the seven emirates of the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and it's one of 6 countries that make up the GCC, as you can see there. So geographically, a very compact area, although it takes a few hours to fly across Saudi Arabia. So that is actually a big country that people don't realize. And, you know, I might touch on it a bit today, but just to give you an idea, that is such a diverse market in itself in terms of geography, the KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and it's pretty tricky in terms of logistics because of the size of it. All those markets there, people might have heard of Qatar, probably because of the World Cup with football in Kuwait. Other markets there, Oman and Bahrain, they're very diverse. That's the sort of takeaway from this slide, I think, for you all. It's not geographically compact. Population-wise, those countries quite small, but you know, there's other countries just across the Straits of Hormuz, Iran, and not too far away, Egypt. They're both almost 100 million people. So when you think about the region as a whole, a big market, you know, close to 1 billion people, including North Africa. But the GCC, as we're looking at there, a bit smaller in terms of population and demographics, about 60 million people, and they're all very diverse, although there are some commonalities that we'll talk about. So just following on from that, the diversity is really demonstrated there. So in Qatar, for example, you know, depending on who you speak to, the GDP per capita is anywhere between sort of $65,000 and $120,000. UAE, again, people are aware of the luxury, they're aware of the premium living, they're aware of the 5-star hotels. There is a higher GDP per capita there, but as you can see, it's not as high as Qatar. KSA, it's about 30 million people now. So the GDP per capita on average is a bit lower, but then there is a pocket of society who have a higher spending power, and that skews, you know, the outlook slightly. Bahrain and Oman, very different markets again. So again, the real takeaway from this is the diversity. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution when you're looking at the Middle East or the GCC, and even in country either. But there are some commonalities, as I said before, that you can really work towards and try and capitalize on. So the challenges, the hurdles, undoubtedly there's an opportunity there in the Middle East, but what are the challenges? No 2 countries are the same. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach in all the markets, let alone one. Then it's going to be an expensive experience for you and not very fruitful. To highlight the diversity, as I've said there in that second point, the UAE, if we're talking about retail for the time being and not necessarily food service, about 80% of the landscape is modern trade, what we call modern trade, and they're your A and B stores, so your Carrefours and those types of stores. We have some others like Spinneys and Choitrums and a few others. That comprises about 80% of the market. The other 20 is more of your traditional type of stores. Now, if you go to KSA, Saudi Arabia, it's inverted. So about 80% of the market is still traditional. But that 20% in terms of weighted distribution, that is modern trade, is quite significant. But 80% of the market is traditional, where you have the old bakalas, where somebody drives up outside, they beat their horn, someone from the shop runs out, you give them, I want some chewing gum, some washing powder, and a water pistol for my son. They run in and they run back out to your 4x4 and give it to you, that type of thing. Really packed stores, narrow aisles, floor to ceiling. Hopefully you might have seen some of those types of images before. Now, some of them, a big chunk of society is still like that. The other thing with Saudi Arabia, for that higher part of society that I referred to earlier, you got to keep in mind that the person actually doing the shopping might not actually be the homeowner, so it's actually somebody else who is actually making some of those decisions. So they might have a shopping list, but they're not necessarily, the homeowner isn't necessarily the one making those decisions. It will say washing powder. It won't specify what type, for example. So UAE alone is about 160 different nationalities now, give or take, plus or minus. Can we reach everyone? Who are we trying to reach? Is reaching UK expats in the UAE a strategy? There's anywhere between 250 and 400,000 UK GB expats in the UAE. So when we're approached and someone says, and I ask a few questions, and their strategy is purely to reach British people in the Middle East, that's a very small proportion of people. And furthermore, maybe 10% of those people might want to buy your products. So if it's 400,000 people in the whole of the UAE that are British, maybe 10%, 40,000 are actually your customers. It's not a big market. That's not even a medium-sized town in the UK. So what is your strategy? Just other noteworthy elements there. Huge gifting culture in the Middle East. We have a lot of holiday seasons that you will undoubtedly be aware of. The working week, that's something you've got to take into consideration. Other considerations, US dollar is probably the currency that you'll want to work in, because currencies are pegged against the US dollar. So it gives you some stability. It gives you an ability to think forward, manage your budget, your money, your finances much more accurately, with more certainty. And then the interesting thing is, people think of Saudi, they might have some images. People are becoming more aware of its growing liberalism. And at the moment, half the population are on social media in KSA, which is interesting, because those young people are hugely influenced by the West. So that provides lots of opportunities. So as I touched on there, we follow trends from the West. We're influenced by social media. Traditionally, some of the people with the higher disposable incomes in that region have spent much time in the West, either being educated or visiting the West. So they're aware of and influenced and open to Western products from the UK, especially. They perceive that to be high quality. So that's something that's really in your favor. The other thing about, we're a hub. The opportunity is that we're a hub. So whether you're coming with a new healthy snacking type of product, we have people from all around the world who will be open to that idea. As I said, the 160 different nationalities in the UAE alone, they're open to those ideas. So there is an opportunity, but how are you going to exploit that opportunity and utilize your advantages and your strengths to your advantage? The final point there, in a lot of Western countries, in Europe, for example, you see it with Brexit now in the last couple of years. There's instability. In the UK, the general elections, everything changes. There's instability. There's a lot of infighting politically. In the Middle East, in a funny way, there's a lot of stability, because generally it's monarchies, and things, they make a decision, and this is what we're going to do. So we saw that with, how we've handled the pandemic. Okay, this is what we're going to do. It's compulsory for you to wear masks. And that was from day one. It's compulsory for you to do this. It's compulsory for you. There's a curfew in place. And although it might be archaic and it might be dictatorial in some people's eyes, there gives you certainty and some stability, and you know the landscape that you're dealing with. And that can be advantageous. So, things for you to consider. Reality is the business takes a long time in the Middle East. Why? Primarily because it's built upon relationships. So you can have lots of Zoom calls, but unless you get out there and meet someone face to face, shake their hand, see what they're really about, and then crucially, they can see that you're invested into the region. They can see that you are not just going there for a quick buck and to get out, that you're actually sincere, you're authentic, you're genuine. That carries a lot of weight. So we are more relationship based than many other markets. It is a saturated market now. You can imagine that there's people from 160 countries, and we're in the middle of the world, and people are coming from everywhere else. And there's flight centers, in the UAE with Emirates and Etihad, and in Doha with Qatar Airways, with many, many millions of people every year coming through our region. You can imagine that we have a saturated market, so you have to be really clear about your offering and what your point of difference is. And alongside that, you got to think: am I manufacturing led or am I market led? Just because this is successful in the UK, is it going to be successful? So, am I going to just dictate to these guys what they like, or am I going to listen to them and then tweak my product accordingly? That's worth a really crucial point that you need to consider. So just narrowing it down a bit to the UAE, most of you are aware, and I've touched on some of this already. Somebody told me 180 different nationalities. I don't quite believe that, but I should have edited that. Maybe 160. As I've touched upon, huge expat population, but a lot of people from the subcontinent. So those Western expats who are considered Western are only about 1 million people, and that's including all of Europe and the US as well as the UK. So a lot of the stuff I've touched upon there, but hugely forward-thinking, ambitious, open to ideas. If you have a product, you have a plan, you have a point of difference, and you want to make it happen, then it's a great market and a great opportunity. So a bit of the landscape, just diving in a bit there, a bit deeper. A bit of an Carrefour is the dominant player in the market in terms of modern trade. So in the UAE, this is still, and they are alongside a couple of others have most of the weighted distribution. So you need to think about how you're going to access the market. And I'm just going to touch upon that quickly now. If you're going to go via a distributor or if you're going to go straight to retail. If you go straight to retail to someone like Carrefour, as you can see there, they are strong. You're covering a certain percentage of the market, depending on how much you invest, listings and things like that. But if you're going to go direct and you're only going to end up in one of the smaller retailers, then you might only have 4%. They might only have 4% market share. Okay, and how many of their stores? So if they have 4% and you're only in half their stores or a third of their stores, and then you can start doing the maths. You work out how much of this market am I really reaching? Am I really giving myself an opportunity to take advantage? So the advantages of going direct to retail: fewer barriers to entry, normally less expensive. It can be quite a quick solution. You don't have to hit MOQs because the main consolidators, the main retailers have partners in the UK who do the consolidation for them. So you can do a pallet maybe and dip your toe in the water. But then many disadvantages. You're not going to have as big an influence on how you're merchandised, your planogramming, these types of details that are crucial to actually getting your product off the shelf. So key here is getting your product on the shelf. If you've got a point of difference, is relatively easy. But then how can you get your product moving off the shelf? That's the thing you've got to really consider here. So you can't necessarily affect your pricing that much here. So that's one of the disadvantages of that consolidation process and that route. So alternatively, you can find a distributor. Obviously, there's some challenges there. You need to be patient to get the best fit distributor. Who is the best fit for you? Get the large distributor, they might be disinterested. They're collecting names, they're collecting brands. They're not really motivated to help you grow your brand and your product. Get one who's too small, they won't have the leverage with the retailers. So they're going to be asked for bigger listing fees. They're going to have, they can present a budget to you that's more expensive. So there's a trade-off there. But then the benefits, you control your brand. You control your pricing. You work with a partner who's really invested into you and is on the ground. You have sight of what's happening every day, in theory, if you're working with a good distributor. That means you have stock and sales reports. That means you have an input into your budget, your activation and promotional budget, your A&P budget, and things like that. So you can have a greater influence on how you're going to promote, how you're going to market, which stores they list you in, those types of things. Whereas if you're working through a consolidator, it's very easy. You drop it at a warehouse, or they collect it and take it to, say, Heathrow, and you just wash your hands of it, and you might have an incremental sale, but you don't have sight after that process necessarily. So you don't really know what's happening. And 6 months down the line, they suddenly say, we're not buying yours anymore. And because they're dipping their toes in the water with somebody else. So, but you won't have an idea that that's happening, and you won't have a real insight as to why that is. So yeah, I hope that's a bit of a surface level introduction. I hope that's helpful. And if you would like to contact me directly, it'd be great to hear from you. I can forward this presentation on as well. And I'm sure there'll be some questions that pop up, and it'd be great to chat with some of you. Thank you.
That's great, Ben. Thank you so much. And I think, two things stood out for me was that, as I said at the beginning, you've definitely demystified the myth that it's all about luxury hotels and the expat market. And I think it always strikes me whenever I listen to you talk about how much what a small percentage of the total population the UAE is, first of all, but also within that, what a tiny population Western expats are, and there's so much more in the Middle East, in the GCC countries, and also it always reminds me. You said about relationship building, that it reminds me of the hours I have spent whipping and piping cream in hotel kitchens and bakeries and airline kitchens in Dubai, trying to persuade not just the distributors and build those relationships, but also building those relationships with the end customers. And I think obviously that goes for any market, but none more so than in GCC. So that's a really interesting insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as you said, if anyone got any questions for Ben, pop them into the question box, and we'll come to them. Thank you, Ben. And so I'm going to hand over to Cameron. So poor Cameron, as I said, is in New Zealand, waiting to go to bed very patiently. I think he's going to share some insights with us about the ASEAN markets. And it's a region which we've had a lot more inquiries about over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. And I must admit, when we first started talking to Cameron and his team, I think we had to get the good old atlas out and to actually say, well, what exactly is ASEAN? Which markets does it cover? But there's definitely a lot more interest from UK exporters at our end, and I think you're seeing that too, Cameron. So I'm going to hand over to you, and you're going to tell us all about the ASEAN region.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me quickly introduce our business as a starting point before we get into the nuts and bolts. We are, in terms of what we do, we're a food and beverage export development agency. We specialize in high growth Asia Pacific markets. So the markets we work in are listed out there. So Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Look, the short of it with our business, we are effectively an outsourced sales and business development division for a portfolio of New Zealand, Australian, and UK food brands. Our core reason for being is to broker distribution for our clients' brands in those markets. We do a number of things, but at the end of the day, that's the key barometer that we're rated on. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to keep it pretty short today around the content that I'll cover, but very happy also to take on questions towards the end. I thought today I'd start off obviously with the elephant in the room, which you can't avoid, which is COVID and ASEAN markets. Look, ASEAN, it's a very dynamic region. You've got markets ranging from, say, Singapore, which is incredibly developed. It's on par with the major Western economies in terms of development, in terms of, it's got some of the highest spending power in the world. Per capita income, is right up there at the top globally. And then you've got markets like, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, which, very, significant markets. Indonesia, population of 170 million people, very quickly growing middle class, same as the Philippines, same as Thailand, obviously working off a small base, and they've all been affected by COVID differently. Singapore, which did very well, right from the beginning, they controlled, COVID very well. Just, the last couple of weeks have gone back into another lockdown. Malaysia has been in lockdown, in and out, since COVID kind of kicked off. Indonesia's done, surprisingly well. Bali, where our sales and marketing office is based, and our team is based there. They shut that down right away, and they haven't really opened up since. So they've controlled it quite well. Thailand's, they've had their challenges with lockdown. Vietnam's done very well. They locked down very quickly. So look, all in all, there's certainly been disruption in the markets, but at the same time, when you look at the food and beverage import and distribution business, it's a business. These guys have no opportunity but to go on. The retail business is obviously doing very well, as it is globally. Food service was crushed originally. There have been pockets of food service opening back up, but there have been the ongoing shutdowns and the like as well. But all in all, when it comes to our business and the brokerage of brands into, new grocery or new food service channels through importers and distributors, generally, things are moving, and the business is ongoing, which is obviously very positive. In terms of what is working and what is moving, look, importers and distributors are still assessing new food brands. I'd say in some cases more aggressively than pre-COVID. We're getting through that process of, the importers and distributors that we're working with, reviewing and putting forward their distribution plans for our clients' consideration and the like. So that side of it hasn't really changed too much. In terms of roadblocks, there've really been two major roadblocks that we see. One is obviously, once we've gone through the process of appointing, the importer and distributor in each market for our brands, then we move to retail listings. We are seeing a higher incidence of delays when it comes to the approval of the listings, and a lot of that comes back to the fact that many of the listing decisions are done by committee. So obviously, the ability for these listings committees to meet to assess new products, has been somewhat affected. So while there are delays there, we are still certainly seeing the listings coming through, but with under somewhat duress when it comes to delays. But all in all, look, all things considered, the business is going on. We're getting new products into market. We're activating distribution and promotion. So all things considered, compared to where I thought things may be when we went into, that initial shock of COVID, March last year, we're feeling pretty good about life, to be honest, in this part of the world. In terms of trends and demand products, obviously these are quite stark generalizations, but these are some of the trends that we're seeing. Look, the plant-based thing is going crazy like it is everywhere. We've been, in the last 12 months, we've been in the plant-based kind of meat category throughout the region. We've also been in plant-based milks and the like as well. And, that category is very dynamic and it's going very well. Health and wellness, obviously with COVID, that's a no-brainer. Consumers are looking for better options from a health and wellness perspective, to take care of themselves and their families. Ready meals is one that took off quite quickly, when COVID kicked in. That said, there is some very strong local competition out of markets like Thailand in the ready meal space, and that often that category does come back to price. So there is definitely a market there, but it is one that is quite affected by price. Dairy desserts, dips, baby food's one that's done very well for us. We've been working with Ella's Kitchen, and that's going incredibly well across the region. At-home cooking products as well, baking, condiments, sauces, and the like, and bakery goods. Obviously, from a pragmatic perspective, people are spending more time, cooking at home or baking at home, versus eating in the street stalls, which is very much an Asian thing to do when it comes to, lunch and dinners, the hawker stalls and the like. But, I would argue that at-home cooking and baking is working off a very small base, but it is something that we are seeing some growth in. Next slide, please. Okay, some considerations, and hopefully, some of these points perhaps echo, or validate what the brands are seeing in the markets as well. From our perspective, there are, people ask us, what categories are working, where are the opportunities? In our view, there are, generally opportunities in all markets, in all categories. However, you really need to understand the requirements of each market. When I talk about the requirements of each market, it's really around, understanding your category, understanding your position within the category, understanding the supply chain when it comes to kind of that margin structure from your export price right up to your on-the-shelf price. You really do need to understand which each of the participants in the chain, what they need, from a distribution perspective, from a retailer perspective in terms of margin, and for retailers, obviously their trading terms as well. If you understand that supply chain and you put some time and you engage people that actually understand how those supply chains work from a margin perspective, you're going to have a much better negotiation than going in cold and not really understanding, how those things work. Look, it's really important and this sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but it is really important to articulate your USPs versus your competitors. Obviously, a lot of our clients are kind of top three in their categories, either in New Zealand, Australia, or the UK. And so by association or as a result of that success, they kind of feel like perhaps everybody knows about their brand, but it is important to understand that when you're going to a new market, you're somewhat starting new, you're starting fresh. So it is really important to bring it back to the basics and be able to clearly articulate, what is your USP versus your competitors. And that's not only your UK competitors, but also your global competitors as well. Look, in my view, getting your pricing strategy right is probably the most critical thing that you can do. And I'm not coming here from the perspective of saying, look, you've got to drop your pricing, your export pricing, you've got to do these things. You don't. But you really need to understand the category, and you really need to understand, where you can be positioned within that category, because, if you don't have to be the cheapest in the category, obviously, but if you're not in range of the category versus your competitors, no amount of marketing spend, no amount of digital marketing, no amount of in-store sampling, nothing's going to work, because you've really got to induce that trial and purchase. So again, understanding that supply chain, that margin structure there is really important, because that does allow you to have a more common sense, negotiation with all partners. You do need to understand, obviously, category dynamics and local supply chain. Markets like the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, their cool chain, for example, and the challenges in that cool chain versus somewhere like, say, Singapore or even Malaysia, for example. So if you're in the short shelf life business, whether it's short shelf life drinks or short shelf life yogurts and the like, you need to take those things into consideration, because within the last, when we started out this business 10 years ago, we heard all types of stories around containers sitting on wharves and being unplugged, and these are frozen containers. We also heard stories about retailers turning off their freezers and their chillers at night to save on power costs. So obviously the world's come a long way in those 10 years, but some of those challenges do still exist. So really do dig deep into what some of those supply chain challenges are that you might face in those markets. Localizing your strategy is ultra important. Echoing what Ben said, you can't do a one size fits all strategy for the region. You really do need to look at each market on a case by case, whether that's pricing, whether that's marketing strategy, whatever it is. You really do need to localize it to be successful. If you're running a digital marketing strategy, you really need to think carefully about using local partners, whether it's local agencies, whether it's local content providers, whether it's key opinion leaders, because operating a generic digital marketing strategy is a bit like turning up with a generic pricing, a generic price list, which covers all markets. It just really doesn't work, and it's really important to localize there. Look, collaboration on strategy within market partners is a big thing for us. I've heard talks, today around, using consolidators and direct to retail and these types of things. But, in our view, there's nothing better than having an on the ground importer and distributor who can, of course, manage the key important distribution functions, but also most importantly, the merchandising, the marketing, the promotion strategies. Because as Ben says, getting the product on the shelf is easy, but driving it off the shelf is the most important part, because shelf space is real estate, and if you're not giving a return on that real estate, then the retailers are going to turn it over to someone else. So the listing fee, yes, brands don't like that word, and they try to avoid listing fees, and there are challenges there. But marketing support is absolutely critical to drive your product off the shelf. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to finish with one slide on practical aspects of doing business in ASEAN. From a practical communication perspective, most importers speak English very well, actually, and are Western educated. Importers are importers, and they import from Western countries. So, they really do need to not only speak English, but also, trade or operate in a way which is, English or Western friendly to some degree. So I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised in terms of your engagement, in the region. The COVID has affected marketing strategy in the region. Before, a significant chunk of budget typically went to in-store, whether it was price promotions, whether it was tasting programs and the like. That's, the tasting program, the sampling program part has really been affected by COVID. The general sentiment of the market now is that brands need to come with a strong digital strategy, and again, a localized digital strategy, whereby you're obviously creating content and pipelining content to consumers that is helping with brand building, but at the same time you're pipelining those consumers also to sales channels, whether it's online or offline, to let them know where the goods can be purchased. We have a dedicated marketing department that provides localized digital marketing strategy and implementation of that strategy to our clients across those markets, because that it's absolutely critical. In terms of typical market entry timeframes, look, there's a number of things to consider there. If you want to take the first importer and distributor that sends you an email, then things can happen reasonably smoothly. But I would really encourage all brands on the call to take your time to really understand your category, the market dynamics, at the store level, if you're a retail brand, prior to going out and engaging importers and distributors, not one but all the relevant ones that you can get your hands on in the market, and really getting them to pitch for your business through putting forward distribution plans that cover off all those fundamentals of pricing strategy, their promotion strategy, the forecast, the budgets, their distribution strategy and the like. Then you can weigh all those up against each other, because the analogy between a bad distribution past relationship and a bad marriage is somewhat similar. It's much harder to get it right it's much harder to get into market a second time round than to do it right the first time. So if you are in the fortunate position of having not taken the first cab that came along and just pipelined a bit of product into market, and maybe had not such a great experience, maybe because the price on shelf wasn't sustainable or the distribution wasn't right, or the like, do put the time into getting it right. Do engage, professionals that understand these markets and have a track record of launching brands in the market, because while it might cost you a bit of money, it's going to take a lot of the headache away. ASEAN consumer habits versus the UK, New Zealand, and Australia even. Look, ASEAN consumers, they don't shop weekly. If you look at Singapore, if you walk out onto the street, look left, look right, look straight or behind you, and you see a convenience store or a supermarket. So consumers will purchase a lot more frequently. And for that reason, just basic things like cupboard space and, freezer, refrigerator space, nothing like the UK, nothing like New Zealand or Australia, where we buy in, semi-bulk and we buy for the week. Cooking hobs, that consumers in most of these markets don't have ovens, for example. A lot of them just run, cooktops, for example, or gas hobs. And you can imagine, how that changes the dynamic around purchasing habits of UK food brands. In terms of my final point really is around the brand, importer consumer communication norms. And, communication is absolutely key, to the longevity of a business. Again, coming back to what Ben said earlier about just putting product on a ship and shipping it off and, washing your hands of it and somebody else can take care of it. That's not the way really to do it well. If you do want a sustainable business, you've got to work with your partners. You've got to participate. You've really got to engage and come to the table with your ideas and be ready to support your local partners' ideas, through action and through investment in that market. So that's my summary. It was a bit quick fire. You can reach me if you'd like. The email address, Cameron Gordon at exportinsight.com. Hopefully you got something useful out of that, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Cameron. That's great. And I think by default, rather by design, it's kind of brought us completely full circle back to where we were when we started originally, about the importance of, ASEAN seems like a really exciting region. As you said, there are opportunities in every market, but everybody's got to consider it from a personal, their own brand perspective in terms of looking at markets, looking at the opportunities, looking at what's happening in their category, finding the right distributors. So I think, within what you said, there were lots of a good summary of all the lessons that we've touched on as we've gone through the whole session today. So yeah, I'm conscious that we're running well over time, which is a good sign. It means that everybody's engaged. And so I'll just ask you a couple of questions that came up to both of you. One was around the opportunities for private label. Are there opportunities? Ben, come to you first in the Middle East.
Yes, by all means, yeah. A lot of those retailers now, they are looking to do their own private label, expand that. So the numbers up to fairly recently, there is a small proportion of their business was private label. They're obviously aware of the opportunities to make either greater margins or expand what they do or take control of what they do by bringing in private label business and creating private label business. So yeah, there are, but yeah, all the other points that we mentioned all apply. How are they going to do that? How are they going to manage that? Are they going to be in control of what they can? Yeah, so.
Great, thank you. And just while I've got you, somebody asked a question about UK consolidators, whether they play any part in choosing the brands that are taken on by the retailers in say the UAE. Do they play any part in that, or is that always the retailer decision?
It's a case by case. So some of them do. Some of them it's a push and a pull. So it's a pull from the retailers in market. And then it's a bit of a push from the consolidators. Quite a lot of them, they're sister companies, so they're not two separate entities. And then some of the bigger players also have buyers here, so they have an office here with a designated buyer as well, and they will coordinate it as well. So it really does depend on who you're talking to.
Great, thank you. And I'll just come back to you, Cameron, again with the same question about private label. Opportunities in your part of the world?
Look, it's private label's not our expertise. I'll be very clear there. We're very much about branded, launching brands and markets. But look, there's certainly opportunities. It is a bit fractured. You've got some groups that do it very well in Singapore, for example. Then you've got regional groups where you would think that it could work very well. The Dairy Farm Group, for example, which is all through Asia, head office in Hong Kong, but the private label thing never really seems to work. They negotiate it in Hong Kong, then the guys in Singapore don't want to take it; they want something else. So it doesn't. It's not really as smooth as you'd hope. The ones that seem to do it best are the more domestic guys, domestic retailers, such as say FairPrice in Singapore, who strong retailer, one operation, and they seem to be able to drive that strategy pretty well.
Great, thank you. That's really, really useful. And just a final question I'll ask you, Cameron, about trade associations. Somebody's asked whether you would recommend building relationships with in-market trade associations.
Chambers of commerce, industry associations. Look, perhaps, we've always found that, we've been doing it for quite a while, like Ben, I guess, but what we've found is that the best way to go after, local partners is to go and engage them meaningfully and to really show them that you're serious about the market. You're not just turning up, on an opportunity, but you're able to, to map out to them, again, what we do when we go and pitch on behalf of clients is not just turn up with a presenter and a price list, but turn up with a whole strategy around, being able to clearly show what our client's category is doing in the market, where our client's going to sit within the category in that market, how our client's going to support the business from a listing and an ongoing A&P perspective. And very quickly, you've got a commercial opportunity there versus just a product. In-market partners are much more likely to jump at an opportunity like that because you've done their work for them and they can quickly see the opportunity. I think that's the way to do it. Industry associations, chambers of commerce, typically they're not really at the coalface when it comes to that commercial aspect of the people that are actually going to be buying your products. So it can be a bit of a weird dynamic around, them trying to sign you up so that, you can be part of their membership and you actually being able to get what you need, from them to drive the business.
Great, good advice. Thank you very much. Great. Well, I think that's answered pretty much all the questions that we've had. But if anyone's got any question, I know both of you are very open to people getting in contact.
Sure.
Got your contact details or contact you via us. That's no problem. So yeah, thank you both very much. I think that was really, really insightful, and hopefully we've tempted a few more UK exporters to look at the Middle East and ASEAN as a result of you joining us today. So thanks so much. And
thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'll let you get to bed, Cameron.
Thanks, Nicola.
So I think Sandra's going to come back and just join me briefly.
Yep, back again. Yeah, well done. Yes, conscious we've kept people sitting at their desks for quite some time. So I guess some people will have dipped in and out, and hopefully those that couldn't stay for the whole thing can enjoy the recording, which I believe the IFE Connects team will be sharing. So yeah, I think, Nicola, we sort of said what we'd do now is just sort of do a quick roundup, just to sort of say thank you, obviously, to everybody today. I think it truly has been some amazing advice, and I think it does demonstrate the experience and the value of the FDA community, in that we can pull together, a good group of people who we know will have insights that are going to be of interest to others. So I think a big thank you to everybody. And I think just by closing, we'll just do a quick sort of reminder of the FDA services. I won't run through a big sales pitch, but for those of you that didn't join at the beginning, this is a useful slide just to give you a flavour of some of the things that we do. Hopefully we've demonstrated our expertise. If you are interested in signing up, we do have 3 member tiers designed to allow you to buy in at the level that's appropriate to your needs. And if you go to the FDA website, which is ukfdea.com, there's a little Join Us tab, and you can read a little bit more about what we do and how we do it for you. The price point, I think the next slide just shows you the price point, which again, I think I said at the beginning is I thought it was quite a good quote somebody gave me, that the light monthly version is less than their mobile phone bill. So I don't know how much value you get out of your mobile phone bill, but hopefully FDA membership will be something that you can factor in. And we'd love to have a conversation with you separately if you just want to find out a little bit more and see what we do. I think our final slide just gives the contact details. Oh, no, sorry, missed one. Yeah, that's just a bit of a sales pitch to say that there are various brands that agree with what we've just said. So here's our contact details. Do get in touch with any thoughts you have. We are a trade association. We do work for our community. We're delighted to partner with IFE Connects because we very much value, their role within the UK food and drink sector, and very much hope that their trade shows that we take part in, the specialty food, the IFE, are both going to be back up and running, because I think I certainly have definitely missed trade shows, and I'm sure Nikki and her team have as well. So yeah, thank you, Nikki, for the opportunity today.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Sandra, Nicola, and the rest of the panel. Such fantastic insights, and I'm sure many will take on board this year. If you feel you've missed anything or would like to share this session with a colleague or a friend, we record all of our Connects content so you can share and play it back anytime. But thank you very much for everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you again